The entire island of Cuba doesn't actually belong to Cuba. Down here in the southern part of Guantánamo Bay sits an American naval base that's been there since 1903. But here's the mystery. During all his years in power, Fidel Castro never took it back. Why? Let's find out. To understand this, we have to rewind to the late 1800s. Cuba was under Spanish rule, and a major rebellion was brewing. When the U.S. battleship Maine mysteriously exploded in Havana Harbor, America declared war on Spain, the Spanish-American War. After Spain's defeat, the U.S. occupied Cuba. Congress passed the Teller Amendment, promising not to annex Cuba, but then came the Platt Amendment, which basically overrode that promise. It allowed the U.S. to intervene in Cuba's affairs and to lease land at Guantánamo Bay for a naval base. In 1903, that lease was signed perpetual, meaning forever for a tiny yearly payment. And from then on, Guantánamo Bay became American soil, inside Cuba. For decades, the U.S. had huge control over Cuba, economically and politically. American businesses dominated, and U.S. Marines intervened whenever things got unstable. Then came Fulgencio Batista, a dictator with close ties to Washington. His corruption and brutality sparked a rebellion led by Fidel Castro and his movement, the 26th of July Group. By 1959, Castro's forces overthrew Batista and took control of Cuba. Soon after, he declared the revolution socialist and aligned with the Soviet Union, turning Cuba into America's communist neighbor just 90 miles away. Naturally, Castro saw the U.S. base at Guantánamo as a violation of Cuban sovereignty. He called the old lease invalid since it was signed by a government that no longer existed. He demanded the Americans leave, but the U.S. refused. And even though Castro could have easily surrounded or attacked the small base, he didn't. Why? Because that would have meant war with the United States, a fight Cuba couldn't win. When the new government accidentally cashed one of the U.S. checks for the base lease, Washington claimed that meant Cuba accepted the deal. Castro called it a mistake and never cashed another check again. Tensions exploded in 1961 with the Bay of Pigs invasion when U.S.-backed Cuban exiles tried to overthrow Castro. The attack failed miserably, and it pushed Cuba even closer to the Soviet Union. Then came the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. The Soviets secretly installed nuclear missiles in Cuba, and the U.S. discovered them, bringing the world to the edge of nuclear war. Guantánamo Bay suddenly became a key military target. Castro tried to use the crisis to demand that the U.S. leave Guantánamo, but President Kennedy ignored him completely. The U.S. made its deal directly with Moscow, not Havana, and once again, Cuba got nothing. You know everything now why Castro didn't get Guantánamo back before he died. Before leaving, subscribe, like, and share the video. Write part 2 to get the other part of the video.